Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my series about Bioshock Infinite. This first video will give you a pseudo-review that will be as spoiler-free as I can possibly make it, and discuss the problem of game reviews in general. If you are not interested in that, you can skip ahead to the second video, where I will start giving you my take on the game's content and plot and my interpretation of it. A game review should tell you about the technicalities, gameplay aspects, and give you an overview about what to expect from the story, if there is any. It's basically a comparison between different games within a genre, a recommendation which games to pick. Then reviewers generally like to give scores, and let me tell you, I could make a whole video series explaining why the whole notion of scoring games, music or movies is a complete folly and wrong on so many levels. The gaming media and most game reviewers have developed templates on how games of a specific genre should be, and for the most part, excluding the whole scoring nonsense, it served them well enough over the last years. Oversimplified, this means when the game in question is a platformer, if the controls are tight, the level design creative and challenging, you'd probably like it. In a fighting game, if the combat is fluid and the characters are well balanced, you'd probably like it. In a role-playing game, if the writing is good, the world is immersive, the progression system is neat and you have plenty of choices to make, you'd probably like it. And in a first-person shooter, if the guns feel powerful, the level design is deep and varied, and there are tons of dudes to violently murder, you would probably like it. Lately, mainly fueled by the emerging indie market, this type of review has become less and less useful. With every twist on traditional gameplay and with narratives getting more complex and deep, what once seemed straightforward has become more tricky. This is mainly a problem for indie games. I mean, let's face it, AAA titles are very expensive mass market products that need to be sold to as many people as possible, and thus are very safe in the design. But with Bioshock Infinite, we have a big budget game that is actually hard to review, because you cannot, or at least you should not, talk about the really interesting parts of this game. So let's start with the technicalities. Bioshock Infinite is a first-person shooter. The shooting and murdering is fun enough, it's varied with room for experimentation, it offers you some high mobility, but in the end it's rather generic, and a somewhat typical shooter. It's run-of-the-mill. I mean, it's Bioshock, and Bioshock itself didn't really reinvent the genre in 2007, 6 years ago. The weapons are basic, nothing extraordinary to be found here. But the biggest problem with the shooting is that it's too easy. I am not an FPS player. I don't enjoy this type of games. I find them to be very boring and often quite offensive for completely the wrong reasons. I played through Bioshock Infinite on hard level and had basically no problem at all. If you are big into shooters, you might find this aspect to be very unchallenging, and this might seriously hamper your enjoyment. You do have a bit of exploration. You can check out many optional routes and rooms, but Infinite is by no means an open world game. You still have a pretty much linear level progression. And this is it? There is no other gameplay type, no puzzles at all, no conversation options, basically no decisions to make. It's just shooting, exploring, and then shooting some more. If this sounds uninteresting to you, you might want to give Infinite a pass. One thing you might find a lot of enjoyment in is the art design. It's generally pretty awesome, especially the music. I can't really remember any game where the music was overall this good. This is obviously a matter of taste, but I don't mean it in a way that these are songs you will put on your MP3 player and listen to all day. What I mean is the music very deliberately builds on the atmosphere. The whole sound design does that very, very well. And apart from some of the combat tunes, which are rather generic compared to everything else, I think the art design, music, and sound are part of what makes this game something truly special. And now comes the problem. In my opinion, I couldn't tell you anything more about Bioshock Infinite without going into spoilers. Even more, every spoiler I give will influence how you would experience the game, and that should not be. Expect a fairy tale, nothing more can I say. But then the basic game review question remains. Should you be interested in Infinite? Is it worth your money, time and effort? I think if you are someone who enjoys stories you need to think about. Stories that are a little bit unusual. If you're into that, you will very probably get at least some enjoyment out of Bioshock Infinite. But it even goes a little further than that. It's not only that the story is unusual in itself, it's also told very different than it is in most mainstream games. So you not only need to be someone who likes video game stories, you actually need to pay attention to what's going on. You have to listen. You need to be interested in what's going on. You have to immerse yourself. Also, if you're into straightforward, self-explanatory plots, you won't find that here. Bioshock Infinite is something you need to put a little bit of thought into it after the game is over. There are so many things happening that you need to pay attention to and start to think about at some point, to figure out what they mean or what they could possibly mean. Otherwise, you will reach a point where you're left completely baffled by what's going on. You won't understand a thing, and probably this whole game could turn out to be very frustrating for you. There are also a few very minor gameplay flaws that you might consider to be immersion breakers. For instance, you heal by eating food. That's fine, it works for the most part, but at some point in the game you might see a food stand, full of tasty food, and you can't interact with it. It's only set dressing. For some people, stuff like this is a big immersion breaker. In Infinite, you have to get over it, ignore it, or again, this may seriously hamper your enjoyment of the game. If you can't do that and can't draw any appreciation of the parts that are story-focused, character-focused, that are thought-provoking, you very probably won't enjoy this game. Otherwise, I must say, if you haven't read or watched a review of this game, and haven't watched a trailer of it yet, well, first, how did you do that? But really, if you haven't, and this is your first exposure to Infinite, and strangely enough by me, I can only recommend, after all I told you, and it still sounds interesting, give it a shot. I think there's a huge chance that if you think this game might be interesting for you, that you will find at least some enjoyment in it. The only other recommendation I want to give, if you have decided to play this game, try to shield yourself as much as possible from anything that could spoil anything on Bioshock Infinite. If I had to draw a comparison to movies, I would compare Bioshock Infinite to a David Lynch movie. And if this doesn't scare you, now assuming that you know David Lynch and are familiar with his work, then go ahead and play it. It's not on the same level, of course. These are different media. A movie is a very different beast than a game. I hope I could help you reach a decision, even though this video is admittedly very vague and does not what you want out of a straight review. But if you decide to take a short vacation in Colombia, I really hope you enjoy it. I hope we will see more games in this vein in the future. For me, it was a great experience, and one I won't so easily forget. So thanks for watching, and if you have played the game, please check out the following videos where I will talk about the meaty stuff, the story, the ending, the everything. Thanks again for watching. Ciao.